The crowd gathered in the polished backyard of the Silverman estate, half laughing, half in disbelief. Standing in the center of the marble-tiled garden was Madison Silverman, heiress to a billion-dollar fitness empire, clad in a designer GI, black belt tied like a trophy. Across from her stood Clarice, her maid. Mid-40s, skin glistening with sweat, in a faded tracksuit and worn sneakers. A few guests whispered and recorded. Madison pointed at Clarice and shouted, "Let's see if that mouth of yours can back up those stories." Clarice simply tightened her ponytail, looked Madison dead in the eye, and said, "You're not ready, child." No one expected what happened next. And what Madison didn't know about Clarice's past would change her life forever. Madison Silverman lived a life few could imagine. Born into wealth, raised in privilege, and trained from childhood in martial arts at private academies across the globe, she wore her black belt like a royal crown. At 22, she had never lost a match, not in a dojo, not at charity tournaments, not even during her Ivy League martial arts exhibition. Confidence wasn't her issue. Humility was. Clarice Johnson had been working in the Silverman estate for 3 years. A quiet woman with strong arms, quick reflexes, and a disciplined routine that began at 5 a.m. every day. She barely spoke unless necessary, did her work flawlessly, and carried herself with a mysterious calm. Most assumed she was just a dedicated housemaid, until one afternoon changed everything. It started with an offhand comment. Madison had been showing off her moves in the backyard, sparring with a hired instructor in front of guests. Clarice passed by carrying a tray of lemon water. One guest asked, teasingly, "Hey Clarice, ever trained in something like this?" Clarice gave a small smile and replied, "I used to teach a little back in the day." Madison, overhearing it, laughed. "You? Teach? What sweeping techniques?" Laughter bubbled from the crowd. Clarice's smile didn't fade. She simply said, "You'd be surprised what I used to do before ironing your robes." Madison, sensing a challenge, leaned in. "Why don't we find out? One round. Right here. You and me." Clarice's eyes didn't flinch. "Are you sure, Miss Madison?" The laughter turned into gasps. The tone had shifted. Madison snapped her fingers. "Bring gloves. Let's see if you can handle someone who didn't learn on the streets." That afternoon, the Silverman garden transformed into an impromptu ring. The help stood on one side, the guests and influencers on the other. Clarice quietly removed her apron and set down the tray. What no one knew, what Madison couldn't have guessed, was that before life forced Clarice into cleaning houses, she was Clarice "Lightning" Johnson, a national Taekwondo champion who trained Olympic hopefuls. Until tragedy struck. Clarice had walked away from that world. Not because she wasn't the best, but because she had to become something else entirely. Madison, unaware of the legend before her, stepped forward with a smirk and launched the first move. Clarice dodged it like a whisper. Then another. Then another. Within moments, the smug smile disappeared from Madison's face. She'd never met someone who moved like this. By the end of the round, Clarice hadn't laid a single hand on her. But Madison couldn't land one either. The match wasn't about power. It was about control. And Clarice? She had more than Madison had ever seen. Madison stormed into her room that night, her pride bruised deeper than any punch could ever leave. She had underestimated someone. And for a Silverman, that wasn't just embarrassing, it was unheard of. She locked herself in and Googled Clarice's name. What she found made her stomach drop. Photos of Clarice, standing tall with gold medals around her neck, adorned martial arts magazines from the early 2000s. Videos showed her in competitions, executing perfect spins, kicks, and stances that made Madison's polished routines look amateur. An old interview surfaced where Clarice said, "Fighting isn't about being loud. It's about knowing when not to strike." Madison couldn't sleep. The next morning, she approached Clarice, not as an heiress, but as a student. "I didn't know," she said quietly. Clarice continued folding laundry without looking up. "Because you never cared to." That hit harder than any punch. "I want to learn," Madison said, the words almost foreign in her mouth. Clarice finally looked at her, the warmth returning to her eyes. "Then put down the belt. And pick up humility." And so, every morning at 5 a.m., Madison joined Clarice behind the estate. No cameras, no guests, just silence, discipline, and sweat. Clarice didn't go easy. She taught Madison what it meant to fight, not for trophies, not for pride, but for purpose. Through those sessions, Madison learned more than kicks and defense. She learned about Clarice's past, how she left professional fighting to care for her sister's kids after a car accident took her life, how she worked jobs to pay their school fees, how she buried her black belt in a drawer and picked up a mop with the same dignity she once carried into a ring. Madison's respect grew. So did her understanding of the world outside her mansion walls. Months later, at a charity gala, Madison was asked to perform a martial arts demonstration. She stepped onto the stage, took the mic, and said, "I used to think a black belt meant you were the best. But it's just fabric. The real belt, what matters, is character." Then she called Clarice to the stage. They bowed together. And for the first time, Madison let someone else take the lead. Moral: respect isn't earned by belts, brands, or bank accounts. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones with the greatest strength. And true strength lies not in how you fight, but in who you fight for.